Good afternoon, folks. I'm Pete Littleton, co-chair of SOFHT, and welcome to our Soft Focus Live event for today on COVID-19, so ongoing management and control, employee wellness and productivity. A few housekeeping points to start with. Rachel will be clicking record shortly, so this session will be recorded for later review. So if this evening you fancy watching this back with a glass of something red or white, then please feel free to do so. Please remain on mute unless you're asking a question, just to avoid any interference and noises. It's amazing how many people's neighbours seem to decide that now's a good time to open up with a lawnmower or jackhammer when we're doing these things. If you are struggling at all with your internet connection, then turning your camera off may help. Just reduces bandwidth and makes it a little easier. And we will be monitoring the chat function. So if you've got any questions that pop up in your mind as we're going, then please feel free to drop those in on the chat function, and we will pick those up as we go. So I'm now going to hand over to my good colleague Ian Booth, who will introduce today's panel and set things rolling.
Thank you, Peter. So welcome everybody. As you may have heard just a minute ago, this is a slightly different format to this session. Paul Keogh has discussed in the past around those areas of wellness and productivity, and thought it might be a benefit through SOFHT Focus Live. Obviously slightly off our normal sort of subject area, but relevant to all of us. So thank you, Paul and Emma, for bringing this together. Also, Paul Davidson from Tate & Lyle, but also one of the SOFHT directors, has offered support around this area and what they've been completing at Tate & Lyle. So the aim will be is to hand over to Paul and Emma from ISS, and then open up for discussion after that. So Paul, maybe I can have over to you and to Emma.
Indeed, and I'll start to share my screen. So thank you, Ian. Thank you, Pete, as well. It is slightly different to most of the topics that we've discussed in these sessions, but in my discussions with Ian and other members of the SOFHT team, this is such a big area that we felt that it was quite important. This isn't a sales pitch from ISS. This isn't here's all the answers to all the problems you're going to face. This was to provoke further discussion around what we think we've learned so far, all brought together in one place, and what we think is worthwhile sharing, so that people can see the various challenges. So what we were looking at, the different user groups, the different employee groups, the status of lockdown, COVID-19 challenges, quarantine, shielding, all of those user groups. Look at the different challenges that they face and how they impact on people individually and collectively, with a view to the fact that those impacts can have an impact on productivity, which in turn, looking at the food manufacturing sector, impacts on production. So, they're two terms that we use and they are slightly different, and ultimately can impact on profit. So, we talk about people making places, people make products. So we've looked at all of the various challenges that people face, looking at the impact of the initial change. And then as we move into whether we're phase 2 or phase 3, wherever we are now, different sites, different contracts are at different stages of the journey. And those different user groups now coming back into the new normal. Emma's got some tips and tricks, some information that we've put together, and I know Paul Davison will pick up on some of the stuff that Tate & Lyle have done as well. And then I've just got some information sources at the end. It is designed to provoke discussion, so please do ask questions. Use the chat function, and I would rather it was a multi-way discussion rather than me preaching to you for 20 minutes, because I'm not very good at that anyway. So actually, before we move on to that, for those of you that don't know, ISS, we are a facility services organisation. I'm the sector director for the food manufacturing sector. I look after all of our contracts in the UK in food production, food facilities and support, so some logistics and so on as well, where we provide various services, cleaning, security, catering, the whole range of facility services to keep factories running successfully. Emma, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
I will. Hello, everybody. I'm Emma Lister. I am the People and Culture Lead for Cleaning and Transport Division, which food manufacturing sits within. So all of the things that Paul says applies to him also applies to me. But I then look after other sectors within our division as well.
And People and Culture is the right title for the group. You know, people say it's in old money, it's HR. It's not. It's everything to do with the people, which are our only asset. So that's why it's termed that way. So moving on to what we did, we identified lots of different user groups, and I'm not even saying here that we've captured them all, but there are different people that fall into different groups that we may not have identified as being a group of people, or we may not have identified as being a subsection of our employees previously. And I'm not going to go through all of them. There are some challenges within some of them. One of the things that I picked up, you know, we have a number of people that aren't officially shielded but fall into a higher risk category, and in some cases it's not been feasible for them to be able to attend work because they can't be protected. The impact that has on that individual, that person, there are a number of different impacts, but we've got some people in that group who are desperate to get back to work, climbing the walls at home. Myself, I've worked an awful lot from home previously, but I've never done, you know, successive 5 or 6 day weeks from home. And I get really frustrated myself about, well, I should actually be doing this because I'm at home. I should be doing this around the house, or there's lots of different impacts. Then you've got people that actually are nervous about coming to work because they're in a particular group. We've also spoken a lot about the site visitors, about, again, people like myself, multi-site managers. I typically would visit 2 or sometimes 3 sites in a day. That's not going to be feasible as we move forward in our industry. And even visiting 1 site, my preparation, my attendance, and what I actually do when I'm on site are going to need to be different. So we've looked at, you know, there's a whole range of things, whereas before we had a group of employees or some subsections of employees, and we had production workers and office workers and R&D staff. Now there's lots of different groups, and the lines between them are often blurred, so there can be multiple impacts on them. There's a lot of new issues that have come up as well, issues that we wouldn't have thought about previously. Now, I know this word has been used an awful lot and it's probably lost some of its meaning because of it, but unprecedented is probably the most used word in 2020 after COVID-19. But genuinely, if you think about the word itself, a lot of the issues that we're facing or the challenges that we're going to face within these user groups are genuinely unprecedented. They're not things that we have had to deal with before. So it's taken a slight change in the way that we approach things, the way that we think about the employees themselves. I don't need to go right back to the beginning to say, you know, happy people produce more and so on. The impacts on productivity will become obvious as you talk to people, and I'm sure you will have seen it yourselves in your own organisations anyway. But obviously within food manufacturing, we are all seen as key workers, and what the connotations are of key workers. Has there been an elevated status applied to people that traditionally were, you know, and there was a hashtag going around for a while within our industry for hidden heroes. You know, did people understand what they do? Our people have always faced risks on a daily basis because of the nature of the industry they operate in. You know, and it's identifying that there are a myriad of new risks and how we actually treat those. So we've done a lot of work around that, and again, the presentation will be shared. It's designed as a prompt for you to use to say, have we thought about everything? And anybody that wants to add anything or say, well, what about these particular groups? Please feel free to do so. When it moves on. Thank you. User group challenges. So various challenges that have been faced. And again, I think a lot of these will resonate with a lot of the people on the call today. Fear. There's been a lot of fear. There's fear around the virus. There's fear around the changes to the workplace, the stability of the company, the future job security, all of those things. But a general feeling of fear a lot of the time is because of the unknown, or sometimes because of change. We know that, human nature dictates that different people accept change in different ways. You have the anger, denial, realization curve. You've got people that readily embrace change. Some people that think it's change just for the sake of change rather than change for benefit. And sometimes some of the changes that we've had to make have been changes that in normal times would have been seen as a negative or a backward step, because they slow us up, they put extra precautions in place, control points, control mechanisms in place in order to safeguard people. But traditionally that would be seen as, well, actually you're slowing down the operation, you're impacting productivity. So we've had to look at how those things are implemented. Motivation levels, people who've gone to work at home, people who have continued to work. I mean, certainly in the late March, early April, a number of our sites where we have large workforces, and we had up to 30% of people either self-isolating, shielding, unable to work because of illness or symptoms, awaiting testing at that time. Everybody else is having to work harder because the work still needs to be done. How do you do that? You can't just draft people in. So there's been a lot around the motivation level, the pressure that people have felt under or put themselves under, the evidence of the workload. Also, from my own, again, having stopped visiting many of the sites and working from here, literally from this position, actually getting access to the colleagues and the data and the information that I want was difficult in the early stages, so quite difficult. Obviously, there's various communication methods, and we're all adopting them even more. I plan to become a TikTok superstar at some point in the future if my kids will allow me. But for the moment, Teams, Skype, Zoom, and so on are serving a purpose. But again, they're quite good if you already know individuals. If you don't already know the individuals, it's quite difficult because you don't get the human nuances that you actually need in terms of collaboration, discussion, genuine understanding. One of the things that I picked up with some of our clients was workstation changes. So these polyurethane sneeze screens, the flexible ones that have been put down production lines, they actually slow some of the workers up. They're there for the right reason. They're the right thing to have in, but they're actually restricting the movement of some of the workers where they used to be able to work collaboratively on something. They now have to work totally individually, going back to, if you like, an old-fashioned production line. So things like that, and just how those impacts are communicated and how workarounds, safe, signed off workarounds, are actually found to combat some of the problems that this has presented. One of the things I found about working from home for the first 2 or 3 weeks, my diet went completely out the window. I noticed it even more going back to one of our clients yesterday and putting on a pair of proper work trousers for the first time. They nearly cut me in half. So it's not been particularly good for me, but that's because I've been working and just going, oh, I'll grab some food rather than stopping and doing things properly. But obviously switching off, downtime, how that impacts on people's stress levels and how that manifests itself in terms of the discussions that we are having with colleagues. that can happen in the workplace, that can happen with people who have remained in the workplace in the factory and people who are working from home and how they're still trying to collaborate, but it impacts on all of those things and can produce negative reactions. The important thing for us was to recognise that there are challenges within each group. Some of those challenges are actually common across all of the groups. Some of the challenges are unique to individual groups. And when we come on to some of the flashpoints, I think hopefully you'll start to see where this could potentially lead if we don't recognise the groups and the challenges that they face. So one of the things we've spoken about, and we spoke about this on one of the previous Soft Focus Live sessions, was about the number of changes in workplaces. People who have worked all the way through and continued to work are now becoming used to the changes, which is great. You know, one-way systems, a new way of getting your PPE or your laundry, new PPE being introduced. We've had canteens and tea rooms and breakout areas that are closed, so no social interaction during the downtime in shifts. And all of these things and how they impact on people is quite important. Changed individual workstations. I've had to conduct via Zooms DSE assessments on a couple of my team that are working at home because hunched over the kitchen table isn't, or Emma, I see you smiling. Yeah, we've discussed this. It's not always, it's fine. I used to do it. I'd come in from a day's work and do a couple of hours at the kitchen table. Well, actually, that's not conducive if I'm doing a full working day at home. And it's looking at those and these little things that can often be forgotten, but can lead to employee well-being issues that then impact on productivity and production and profit. So lots there that we've thought about around the changes. And one of the big things is about general congeniality and social interaction. That leads to ideas creation in most environments. Bumping into somebody and having a quick chat with them about a problem, it's the embryonic ideas that come from those discussions. When you're not in the same workplace or you're not able to actually meet to collaborate in that way, it makes it very difficult. So how do we make sure that you know, this great industry of ours still develops great ideas when we're having to socially distance and keep people apart deliberately in order to protect them? Does that stop us then from coming up with some great ideas to improve production, improve well-being, whatever it is? And so you have to come up with methods of overcoming that. Some of the productivity flashpoints, and I probably should have put number 2 up first, but I'll go through number 1. Obviously, throughout the time we've had at various sites, ourselves, our clients, a loss of critical skills through people being absent. Workplace adjustments, allegedly, and I do say allegedly in some cases, slowing down the process. We're all about productivity level, maximum output, maximum uptime, etc. However, there have been necessary adjustments which have slowed people down, rightly so, in order to protect them. But if that then impacts on the longevity of the company, of the general output levels, you know, it can be seen as a negative. Sometimes the inability to communicate effectively through digital media. I'm getting no feedback from anybody on this, so I am assuming that you're all wowed. But you could be off making a cup of tea and a sandwich. I have no idea. And I don't mind if you are. I really don't mind. Forced collaboration. So we've done a couple of sessions where, right, everybody meet at 9:30 via Teams because I want us to be innovative for an hour about this problem. That's really, rather than we need to discuss this, go away and have a think about it, come back and see me, bump into me later on in the corridor. Oh, great, yeah, I've got 10 minutes now, rather than, can you be innovative at 9:30 tomorrow morning, please? And some negativity around that, around this dynamic agility, as we're calling it. You know, I'll pick up, I'll call Emma. Emma will say, well, I'm actually busy. I'm on back-to-back calls because we have an awful lot of them. Well, actually, I've got a great idea and I really want to discuss it now. And then by the time we actually have our planned meeting, are we as dynamic as we want to be? Are we as agile? The second one, these aren't all statements or comments that have come from our staff or our customers. I have picked them up from a variety of sources, including some on some LinkedIn discussion forums, but some of these may resonate. These are things that have been said and are being said in one or two different formats. And this has caused some flashpoints. So we've had some people who've come back to work, having been shielding, and they're full of enthusiasm and full of energy, and you've got loads of other people who've been working longer hours, and somebody turns up and goes, I've had these great ideas while shielding, let's get to it. And everybody else is like, we're shattered, we need a break, we need a holiday. The throwaway comment of, you know, you've had a nice holiday, haven't you? It's the connotations that those sorts of comments have, that some of these people that haven't been at work have desperately wanted to be at work, and those things just create conflict. Conflict drives down productivity naturally. So lots of people returning full of enthusiasm, you know, and other people are shattered. A comment that was made was, well, none of the senior managers have been on site, it's just the production line, the production supervisors and the production operatives. So do our senior managers really care? You know, that's something that has been thrown around. So you have to think about, okay, how do we deal with that? We've got people at the moment that, yeah, I know that social distancing has to take place, but that's all right. I've had the virus. You can sit with me. I'm fine. I don't mind. I won't catch it from you. You know, it's some people almost becoming blasé to it, and we have to protect against that in the workplace. We can't protect against it outside of the workplace other than through education, but it's just being aware that these things go on. These rules, these new ways of working, they're just to prevent us doing what we do best, etc., etc. And this one came up quite a lot on LinkedIn, prove that we're key workers. And that's more about, that's people saying care about me. That's not saying prove that I'm a key worker, that's saying care about me. Have you really done everything that you can to protect me? Do you recognize me? Do you reward me? All of those things. So, you know, as I say, thankfully, I haven't heard all of these, but I have collated these from a number of sources. And it just shows the potential impacts that all of these changes have had across these user groups. So I'll let Emma talk to you about some various bits and pieces that we've been doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of following on from what Paul said, I kind of then looked at what have we been doing to address some of those issues. And I started really, I'd read this really interesting study at protecting.co.uk, where they had done a poll and found that 30% of employees would be willing to quit their job if the employer didn't make it COVID safe, and 40% of employees said they wouldn't return to work unless PPE was provided. And I think, you know, think about the things that Paul have said in terms of people coming back to work and how they feel about it. I think that's a really clear message for all of us, that we need to have that good communication in place to help them to understand what we've done and what we're continuing to do to support them coming back to work. I feel you know, the partnership between myself and my HCQ colleagues has really helped us to focus on the fact that health and safety is one of the most important aspects of any workplace. We need to ensure that people are in work and are safe. And so we've looked at how we can use tools that we already have, like don't reinvent the wheel. What can we use that's already in place to ensure that we put those things in place? We've got good communication and support for everybody within the business, and we're really, you know, driving forward that positive message to close that loop back to the feedback of, I don't want to come back if it's not safe for me. So next slide, Paul. So we've primarily, looking at employees coming back to work, we've primarily used our pre-existing onboarding journey. So It means that we can consider and recognise where we need to focus our time. So, treating an employee as if they are a new person almost, and going through those steps that we have, and adapting those tools that we've got means that, we're challenging ourselves to adapt to what is essentially an ever-changing situation. And I'm sure you've all experienced, the government give us some advice one day and 2 days later the advice has changed. And so, we need to be able to evolve as leaders of organisations to be able to support employees who are naturally finding that really quite difficult. Next slide, Paul. So looking at employees coming back into work, so before day one, we need to recognise that employees might be returning to work and feeling really nervous. If they've been in furlough throughout the process, so whether it's because they've been shielding or because the site has been partially closed or fully closed, they've completely been able to control their environment whilst they've been at home. So, whether they've themselves decided to use masks or face coverings from the beginning, or they're just not going out to the supermarket, so they're not interacting with people, and then suddenly they're having to return to a workplace where they are not in control. And especially if they've got to use public transport, and we all know that people are supposed to be wearing face coverings on public transport, and not everybody is. And that's really difficult for the authorities to police. So suddenly they're being asked to come into this environment that they have very little control over. And we need to make sure that we're recognising that and doing something about it and supporting them through that. We've also got to think about the employees who have worked throughout and seeing these people come back, and all of the things that Paul talked about with, you've been on a 3-month holiday and that's nice for you. So there could be feelings of resentment for those people who've had a rest whilst we've been working really hard and long hours, and all of those sorts of things. And equally, they could be really nervous about people coming back into the workplace. If we consider that a lot of changes have happened over a very short period of time, and those employees have had to get used to those changes very quickly, and then you bring a whole bunch of extra people in, and now suddenly, people are going the wrong way on a one-way system, or just being challenged with what the changes are. It's important that we recognise that the employees who are in the workplace, and especially if they've been in the workplace since the beginning, may feel pretty anxious about other people coming in. So on the next slide, Paul, it's important therefore that as people are coming back into work, that we recognise the workplace may be very, very different from how it looked before they went. These are some photos of some of our office spaces. We should be reassuring employees that measures have been taken place to keep them safe. In these situations, we've got a very clear one-way system. There's only so many people allowed into the kitchen area. If we talk employees through what those expectations will be, we've taken lots of photos. We've done videos to take the people around the space before they're expected to come back into it, so they can walk through the area with you. And that's really helped to reassure employees who are coming back to see the things that have happened and taken place. We had a really good video done by some employees at Barclays, where they had videoed employees who were in the workplace, and they talked about how they felt and the things that they were doing differently. And so it was their colleagues who were telling them, this is okay for you to come back to. And that got some excellent feedback from employees returning back into work. So next slide. So on day one, we need to ensure that PPE is available and properly explained. So, we need to make sure that employees understand, if you've got to wear a mask, how long do you have to wear it for? Hopefully all day. You've got to wear this thing, you've got to, work in this area. some proper explanation of what the expectations are, rather than, you know, just here it is and get on your way. Talking through those changes to normal working, if there are restricted areas, making sure that everybody is fully aware of what those restricted areas are. Again, in office spaces, one of the issues that we've had is with lifts, that there's a lift protocol that we've never had before, and some employees have found that very challenging. A good use of time for employees returning is to get them up to date with any training requirements. So, you know, a nice soft entrance back into the workplace, so they can do some of that training before they're fully out there in the business. And also considering using a buddy system. So we've had some employees who've worked throughout, have been assigned as a buddy to somebody coming back, and you know, and then you've got somebody on the floor with them who's saying to them, don't forget that's the one-way system. You need to make sure that you have this piece of PPE, and you know, and it's a colleague who is supporting them with that transition back into the workplace. And then finally, making sure that we check with employees at the end of their first day. I think it's really easy sometimes for us, and you know, I know myself, you get really busy, you get to the end of the day, and before you know it, you're a week in. But diarising to do a check with your employee at the end of their first day. Do they have any questions or concerns? How did they get on with the PPE? Do they understand the one-way system or the new ways of working? And give them an opportunity to tell us if there's any concerns that they've got, and what we can do to help them manage that. Next slide, Paul, thank you. So obviously moving forward, we don't know how long this is going to last for, certainly for the foreseeable future. And I think, you know, as employees coming back, and we know that shielding in England ends at the end of July, and a lot of those people will be back into work on the 1st of August. And whilst furlough continues until the end of October, you know, we will start to see employees coming back from the beginning of August and right up until the final wave of returners in November. You know, so we need to keep thinking about it. We need to keep talking about it. You know, employees who perhaps don't want to come back on the 1st of August and are feeling very nervous about that. You know, we've taken a decision that we're not going to force anybody back, but you know, we'll keep having those conversations with them. We need to keep looking at what the health and safety requirements are, because as we've found throughout this, they change. You know, testing has changed, how long you have to be off for after testing. All of those things just seem to change on a weekly basis. So making sure that we are keeping on top of that, that we continue to talk to each other, that we continue to update ourselves and our leaders to enable them to have that message sent across. Excuse me. Is going to be a really essential part of what we continue to do. We also need to ensure that we're not letting complacency creep in. And that this has been an interesting point that's been raised to me a number of times, that employees who have, I've got a tickle in my throat now, excuse me, employees who've been working in the area for a long time, and to Paul's point, you know, I've already had it, so I'm fine, or, you know, we just see the natural creep back towards each other and we're not keeping the distance that we're supposed to keep. You know, and allowing that complacency to creep in really is something that we need to keep on top of and keep managing throughout this, and that will help to keep the relationships healthy. You will have some people who are really concerned about Joe, who keeps invading into my 1 metre or 2 metre space, who doesn't wear his PPE properly, and that can create a flashpoint and a conflict that you know we want to try and manage. So keeping those conversations going is going to be a really important point as we continue through this. And Paul, next slide. I think that might be my last slide, so I think I'm handing back to you now.
Yeah, I think I'll let you go and get a drink, Emma. It looks like
Yeah.
a big one. No, that's brilliant. Thank you. So, I mean, a couple of bits that we were talking about tips and tricks. That's something that we're doing. You know, Emma and the people and culture team have said we've already got an onboarding journey. Let's look at that onboarding journey and see how we can use it rather than reinvent the wheel to actually help people back into the workplace. But what it's also enabled us to do is to focus on some of the people that have maintained in the workplace, but the workplace has changed around them. So we've been able to focus on them. Just a couple of bits from me around the tips, tricks and resources. You all know that there's a wealth of information available, but some of it's conflicting. Some of it, as Emma says, changes from day to day, and that's because the situation changes, government advice, WHO advice. I would recommend to everybody that you try and use reputable sources. I read voraciously, but it doesn't mean that everything I read I use. So there are a huge amount of links on the SOFHT website, and obviously I've said that should be your first port of call, because otherwise Peter and Ian and Sue will have a go at me if I don't say that first. But there is a huge amount of information on there, and I think as members, I sometimes I don't think we actually use the resources that are there enough. Copies of this will be on there. Recordings of all of the previous webinars that have been done, which are really useful. But some other organisations where, and I've got a couple of examples of coming. So the Institute of Workplace and Facilities Management, which is a great organisation. As you go on there, you will find a lot of it is focused on office space. However, there are some really good sections around manufacturing, light industrial. They don't go speciality into food manufacturing, unfortunately, but that's something that we're working on them with. Obviously, some of the other organisations that are on there, and the bottom one that's on there is I find a really useful people website. It pulls together information from the Chartered Institute of Professional Development, as well as other recognised human resources and people and culture industry bodies, and it puts them all together. You can have it as a daily or as a weekly digest. I get the weekly digest and I get some great information off there. And it also gives you some really good stats. Some of the stuff that Emma's got about, you know, surveys that are done. It is really useful. So, you know, I would recommend that you try and take the time, because none of us can be an expert on all of these subjects. Personally, I'm an operational manager. I'm very much a hands-on operational manager. That's what my role is. I have the luxury of having Emma and her team that I can rely on. However, I do need to build up some of my own knowledge, and it's great to be able to use these resources. So just some examples. So this was one that came from the IWFM, which was just a really good graphic that I picked up quite early in April, quite early in May actually, and they've republished it now, updated in their white paper this month. And it was just about some ideas for managers who have staff working at home, or for people who are working at home themselves that don't normally work at home. Now, again, a lot of this information, you will have seen it, you know, let's all start with Joe Wicks. Let's make sure we have proper downtime break. It's great, but it's not always feasible. But it's good to refer back to this and just try and get into a routine, a structure that actually works for you, that makes you productive. But also, this enabled me to talk to some of my team about, are you doing this? Are you getting your fresh air? You know, I had one of my team saying to me, oh, it's 4 o'clock, it must be lunchtime. You know, it's those sorts of things that it just helps. So there's some great resource there. This was one of Peter Ankerstern is the chair of the International Facilities Management Association. Peter's worked for ISS, he's worked for WeWork as well. And just some tips and techniques that he's put out that we've then looked at and we've discussed with the IFMA about how they can be adapted. You know, I'm not going to go through all of those, but he talks there about you need to safeguard collaborative areas. You know, some of our sites, we still have areas where the team walk the boards. That's much more difficult with social distancing in place, but it's a critical part of the quality process. You know, Gemba walks, how do you do joint Gemba walks at all levels of the organisation? in a food factory and still maintain social distancing. It's looking at all of those things. Collaboration is key to the industry continuing to grow, making it as easy as possible for people to move around safely. And what he finishes with there is about collaborative spaces. Collaborative spaces will help to drive the industry forward in all aspects of our industry. Now, they talk a lot about, you know, the collaborative spaces in offices, but we know that we've adapted some of our manufacturing environments to make sure that they're there. We have to safeguard those because that's where the best embryonic ideas come from. So I would say to everybody, you know, widen your resource availability. Go back to some of these links and some of the links that are on the SOFHT website to try and get the information that's going to help you with this. So in summary from us, various user groups, some overlapping, and lots of challenges within them. Most of the challenges would be seen as personal challenges that will impact on a single person's productivity. But when you look at those collectively, when you use the 1%, 1%, 1% rule, you look at the overall impact on the company productivity. So we've tried to identify them. We've tried to then look at how to address them individually, find what works, but also be ready to adapt and evolve that, because it may work this week. And then when guidance changes, which it's going to, it may not work next week. So then looking at the changes that are in place, some of them again overlapping, and the new challenges. So this was quite a lengthy discussion we had with a number of customers, probably late March, early April, that the approach which used to be around the commercial or operational and commercial flow, they were the key priorities. This had been changed to people first, health and safety, then operational, then commercial. And that was quite a change for a number of people. The old thing of, you know, will it make the bike go faster? Yeah, actually, in some cases, in order to protect the entire workforce and therefore protect the longevity of the company, we've actually had to make the bike go slower in order to do it right and make sure that we could continue to do it right post-COVID. So that's just a change of emphasis for a lot of people. It's important to be aware of all of the different challenges within those groups, and the reinduction technique is working really well when we're bringing people back, but also it's enabled us to look at, well, actually, what additional training do we need to give to the people that have maintained working all the way through, and increasing the amount of employee communication that we have. Personally, it's really difficult because I would be on site, so I would stop and talk to people. I can't do that. Or I haven't been able to do that anywhere near as often as I would like. So how do I make sure that I communicate with them and that it's two-way? It can't just be me firing information out to them. I have to be able to get their feedback. All of this is evolving. I like the you know, I'd say to people, the one thing that's constant in our organisation is that change. Yeah, I do like an oxymoron, but we have to openly discuss and encourage in all the suggestions and improvements from all sources. Some of them wouldn't have been feasible in the past. Our best ideas often come from our frontline workers. They're the guys living and breathing it day to day and say, if you do this, you'll come up with a great idea. The guy who decided to only put one strike strip on the side of the Swan Vesta boxes and save them a fortune, those ideas come from frontline people who are living and breathing the actual production process. And the one tip I would give, especially to management levels, is be more available to your staff than you ever have. It's the only way, when you don't have the physical interaction or you're not on site all of the time, that you will get the necessary feedback to be able to act and understand the challenges. If we hadn't had small user groups, Zoom meetings with staff, we wouldn't have picked up on half of the challenges that they were facing until they had become major problems. And that's pretty much where we're up to. There's been very few questions, but I will go on to those in a minute. But
thank you, Paul. Thank you, Emma. Much appreciated. Very exciting. We were discussing bringing Paul Davison as well. There's quite a lot of feedback. So That's from. Thank you, Paul. Thanks. We were discussing bringing Paul Davison as well around any sort of additional view from a manufacturing base.
Yeah, hi Ian.
Yep. I'll maybe hand over to you. Mindful of time, we may not get much time for questions, to be honest. Yes, can do. Yep. So hand over to you, Paul.
Might go off camera if my signal drops.
Yep.
So great presentation by
Paul. You are breaking up unless it's me.
By Paul and Emma, and I think I'm quite keen to hear questions.
Paul, I think we're losing you a bit.
So I'll keep my bit brief. So
sorry, Paul. I think we're losing you. Is it just me or is it Paul?
No,
I'm not sure. I can hear you now.
Paul.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can now. Let's give it another try.
Okay. I'm going to stay off camera in the interest of time, so apologies for that. Yeah, so great presentation by Paul and Emma. I'm very keen to hear questions around this subject. I'm a trained mental health first aider within Tate and Lyle. So we identified a group of people to be trained by Mental Health First Aid England on issues around mental health. We offer a service for anyone to contact us on a confidential basis to discuss concerns. We've covered the issues in the presentation about what the triggers are, and mental health, as we know, can affect everyone at all levels of the business, whether you're rich and famous through to people like myself. So it's a serious subject. Unfortunately, there's still a stigma attached to it. So what we're trying to do is promote that it's good to talk. So one tip I would give is when you've got people that are trained in mental health, put the pictures up on the wall, let people know who they are, let people know how to contact them, and make sure they know that if they want to talk to somebody, it's confidential. It goes without saying. So I'm on the panel to ask any questions about how to deal with mental health issues. Obviously, we can't betray confidences, but it is a subject that is increasing. We were looking at this before COVID hit. And luckily we had all of the trained people in place, because we can now deal with these sort of questions, whether you're a home worker or whether you're at work, the stresses of working in the COVID backdrop. So I think I'll keep it brief, Ian, just to allow some questions.
You're on mute, Ian.
Yeah, okay, yep, thank you. Thanks, Paul. Normally I go on for about 10 minutes before anybody says anything, so that's
we were going to let you.
We do have a question around food safety being compromised, and maybe that we can tie that into the fear element that Paul you mentioned, and any sort of concerns, Paul, Davison, that you just mentioned. So and then open up. So maybe just cover that one. Do you think there's a danger of food safety being compromised as we increase COVID controls? And I had thought we were linking into that. Fear, communication, interaction. Is there an impact on food safety or hygiene management where people don't feel empowered or able to be able to raise concern?
Again, it's about people. Everybody has concerns. It's about offering that listening service. So we shouldn't be running businesses where food safety is being compromised, but people draw their own conclusions. So good hygiene practices is what everybody's worried about, especially if they're working with people who may display symptoms, and then all the mechanisms that kick in after that. So a lot of it is about reporting. A lot of it is about telling the workforce what you're doing, sharing risk assessments. All factories have risk assessments, so share those. Tell people how you've assessed risks. That will decrease levels of anxiety amongst the workforce. So I think that's important. But involve them in the process. There's no reason why we should be compromising food safety. So we need to be explaining to the workforce why that is.
Absolutely, and I think we in one of the earlier sessions we covered on the changes in entry requirements, temperature checking being one of the tools in the armoury, the reassessment of risk assessments, And Paul's right. A lot of this is about the education program. So whether that's visual nudging materials, whether it's staff briefings about these are the changes we are making, that should have a more positive impact on food safety. We're a very good industry in terms of our focus on food safety, and this shouldn't detract from it. This should actually go alongside it, and ultimately should actually make it more robust, because we're looking at more areas of potential risk and therefore putting more critical control points in.
And Paul D, I call you D and K if that's right. Paul D, just linked to Dawn's question around issues to look for. What are the signs? So you mentioned anxiety. You know, how do these manifest? Are they the same in all people? How do you identify where people might have concerns or anxiety or mental health issues?
The basic rule is look for change in behaviour. So people may get quiet when they're chatty, or vice versa. People might show an element of anger or shortness in the way they're talking to people. So it's looking for those sort of subtle changes. We're holding sessions with line managers to how to spot signs of stress and anxiety within their workforce. And a lot of it is about, I think Paul mentioned earlier, increasing communication with either your direct staff or offering yourself to be available for people to talk. And talking is a great way to explore. People quite often come to you on a completely different subject matter, and then it drifts into a conversation around how they're feeling. So it's listening. Listening is the biggest tool in mental health. It's just to listen. I'm not a medical professional. I'm not a counsellor. My training is to listen, offer support, and try and help that person, whoever they are, to actually seek either further help if they need it, or just to share their burden. And that's what a lot of it's about. But it is spotting subtle changes in behaviours.
I think just to add to that as well, one of the things that I really advocate is to ask people how they are on a regular basis, so that it becomes normal to say, how are things, and for them to be able to give you an honest answer. If you've already built that relationship with them, they're more likely to tell you how they're feeling. So you know, asking on a regular basis really helps with that.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you. I'm mindful of the time. I think we need to hand back to Peter as chair for the last 5 minutes, if that's okay. So thank you, everybody. But I'll hand over to Peter for the closing comments. Peter. Hi, Peter. I think we can hear lots of background noise, but not you. Right.
How's that?
That's better. Thank you. Over to you, Peter.
Marvellous. Well, just wanted to say thank you to our presenters today, and also for the questions coming through. It's certainly something that as more businesses are returning, as we're encouraged to return to the workplace, it's certainly the sort of mental health and the changes that people will notice having come back into a business. I know within my own business, we've had people come back from furlough, full of the joys of spring and like a dog bouncing around. And I completely resonate with the comments there of the people that have been working all the way through, going through the lockdown, going, oh God, give us a break. You know, we've been here a while. So thank you very much for sharing those thoughts. It really was very, very interesting. And thank you as well for the questions that have come through. So most of all, though, thank you to everybody for attending today. Hopefully you found today of real benefit, and I certainly have. So thank you all very much, and keep an eye open on LinkedIn and on your social media channels for the next exciting edition of Soft Focus Live. So thank you all very much.